Should the New York Giants trade up, trade down, trade out, or stay put in round one? I'm going to go through all the scenarios with you with the pros and cons coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and happy draft day, everybody. We finally made it. The NFL draft is tonight. Round one of the draft. We're finally going to get the answers that we've been waiting months to find out. Specifically, who do the New York Giants like? What direction are they going in? And above all, once they make the picks of the players, how might these guys fit into the grand scheme of things? So all that is coming up starting tonight. And we, of course, here at Locked On NFL and Locked On Giants are going to have all you need to know. We're going to come to you as quickly as we can after the picks are made or the decisions are made and give you our expert take on all that stuff. So speaking of which, we are going to do on today's show, we're going to talk about trade scenarios for the Giants. Should they trade up? Should they trade down? Should they trade out of the first round? I'm going to give you each scenario and I'll give you the pros and cons of each. And then at the end of the show, what makes the most sense? You know, I have my thoughts, what makes the most sense. You might have yours. And if you do, drop a comment in the box below if watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on our audio platforms, send us an email and let us know what you think. So that's on today's show. Excited to bring that to you. And today's show, by the way, is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, this game is definitely for you. Download the game by visiting ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. And our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. That's Ultimate Football GM. All right, let's get into the various scenarios. What the New York Giants should do. Should they stay put, trade up, trade down, trade out? The first option is obviously to stay put. Be patient. Don't mess around. Don't get cute. All right. I personally don't think the Giants are going to do that. I would be surprised if they stay put, because once you get into the bottom third of the draft, you know, that's when the grades on the players start to clump up a little bit. So if you have somebody who's willing to trade with you, you can certainly do that. But actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's talk about the case to move up. Now, I saw not a stat, but I saw a statement, and I'm trying to remember who made it. It was on Twitter, but somebody wrote, and it was one of the NFL National Insiders. Somebody opined that based on his conversations with a lot of the NFL GMs around the league, that the feeling was there were only 20 players in this draft worthy of a first round draft grade. So if you're the Giants and you have needs at cornerback, you have needs at offensive line, you have needs at receiver, linebacker, you can make a case for linebacker, safety. Do you look to trade up and maybe grab one of these guys that has a first round grade? Well, that depends on how far up you're talking. All right. So the Giants at 25, if they're going to make a trade, my guess is to trade up, you're probably looking in the range of 17 through 20. All right. So number 17 is the Steelers. Number 18 is the Lions. 19 is the Bucks, and 20 is the Seahawks. So I think if the Giants are going to trade up, that's where they're potentially looking. All right. So what are the benefits to trading up, and why would the Giants trade up? Well, if the Giants are looking to add one of the big receivers and those receivers start to slide down the board, then I think it's a no-brainer to try and trade up, so long as the price isn't, ridiculous. I am of the opinion, and always have been of the opinion, that the Giants are not going to take all 10 draft picks. And I say that because if they don't take all 10 draft picks, they're actually going to help their salary cap, because right now they don't have a whole lot of space. And if they can unload some of those picks by trading up, they can help their salary cap. Now, the drawback, of course, is if you trade up, now you're going to have to pay your first round pick a little bit more. So the only way I could see the Giants potentially trading up is if one of those receivers starts to slide down. And by receivers, I mean a Jordan Addison or a Jackson Smith-Njigba, who, by the way, I don't think is going to slide down that far, but you never know. Zay Flowers, I don't know if he's going to be enough to move the needle. I know some people like him. I don't know if he would be enough to move the needle. I think a Quentin Johnston, would be enough to move the needle. So I think if any of those receivers slide down to that 17 through 20 range, I could see the Giants trying to move up. And by the way, I know I've said this before. I know I posted this on my Instagram account. In the last 6 drafts, the holder of pick number 25 has traded out of that spot, whether it be up or down. So I believe the Giants could be team number 7 to do that. Trading up, though, I say this all the time. It depends on who's on the board by the time, the Giants are approaching the clock. And the same is going to hold true here. I think if the Giants trade up, it's going to be to get a receiver. I do not think they're going to trade up to get a cornerback. I might have thought that a couple of weeks ago, like if a Witherspoon or a Gonzalez slid down the board, but I don't know that they're going to slide down, to be honest with you. Plus, this cornerback class is so deep that if the Giants don't get a cornerback in the first round, they should be able to pick up a quality cornerback, maybe, round 2, round 3, maybe even in the beginning of round 4 if they decide to move up. So quarterback to me is more of a need for the Giants, but it's such a deep class that I think, I think in this case, if one of those big 3 receivers slides down, that's the move that you look to, that prompts you to look to move up and grab a player, trade away some of those draft picks that you have. All right. Now, what is the case to move down in the first round? I'll tell you about that coming up next. Hey, Giant fans, if you think you have what it takes to run your own draft, pick your own players and coaches, and manage every little detail of a franchise and building it towards a dynasty, then you need to try Ultimate Football GM. This scheme is so much fun, and best of all, you can play it offline and compete with your friends for bragging rights. And did I mention that Ultimate Football GM is completely free to play, and that Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store? So what are you waiting for? Show the GMs how it's done. Find Ultimate Football GM in the app stores or visit ultimate-gm.com and use that special promo code Locked On, all caps, to get your 100% free boost. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We are here, folks. We made it. The draft starts today. Finally, we're going to get some answers. We're going to find out what general manager Joe Schoen is thinking. We're going to find out who the new Giants are. It's going to be a fun, exciting weekend. It always is. And, as the Giants fill out the rest of the roster, and we here at the Locked On Giants podcast will bring you the content as quickly as I can. It's going to be a little tricky at first, but I'm going to be up late, I'm sure. And I'll try and get you reactions. Even if I do mini shows, I'll try and get you content as quickly as I can, even if I just put a short up over on YouTube, just to give you a quick reaction. Also, make sure you tune into Giants Country. We're going to be doing stuff over there. It's a little bit easier for me to do stuff over there since I'll be at the Giants and I'll be able to knock stuff out, writing, from writing it. So check us out. We're going to try and give you the best possible coverage all weekend long here on the Locked On Giants podcast and over on Giants Country as we cover the New York Giants draft. All right, we are talking about trade scenarios for the New York Giants in the first round. We just got through talking about trading up. Let's talk about trading down. Now, the Giants, of course, are at 25. So let's take a look at who some of the more realistic partners are for the Giants to trade down with in the first round. Behind them is Dallas. Then you have Buffalo at 27, the Bengals at 28, the Saints at 29, the Eagles at 30, and the Chiefs at 31. I don't see the Giants trading with the Eagles. If I had to craft a potential scenario, I would say maybe Buffalo. I could see maybe the Bengals. Probably can make a case for the Saints as well. But to me, I think Buffalo might be, if they're going to do anything, maybe Buffalo is the team they would do it for. Or basically any team that might need a tight end. I think I would see if I could coax them into trading up, because I'm pretty sure the Dallas Cowboys are going to draft a tight end when they go on the clock after losing Dalton Schultz to free agency. So that being said, when the Giants trade down, there's a couple of advantages. Number one, the lower the pick, the lower the cap number. You will also retain the fifth-year option. All right. The other advantage is you can pick up additional draft capital. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, but Pat, you just said in the last segment that you don't see the Giants taking all 10 draft picks. So why would they want additional draft capital? Okay, I'll tell you why. 2 reasons. Number one, to move around in rounds 2 and 3. More importantly, to potentially have picks for next year. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. But the more chips you have, the more you can do. And there's an advantage to that, which again, I'll talk about in the next segment. Now, why do I think Buffalo might be a good trade partner for the Giants? Because what I'm thinking here is, besides the fact that there's the relationship, obviously, between Joe Schoen and Brandon being the GM up in Buffalo. I mentioned the Dallas Cowboys. They will possibly take a tight end. I think they will take a tight end when they go on the clock. But they also might look to grab a running back, which happens to be one of the needs of the Bills. Now, if I'm crafting a potential trade down, if I'm the Giants, I think the team I might look to see if is interested is Cincinnati. The Bengals are drafting number 28. And the reason why I'm going to pick up the phone if I'm Joe Schoen to see if the Bengals are interested in trading up is because one of their needs is tight end. That's one of Dallas's needs. All right. And I actually believe that the Cowboys will look to draft a tight end when they go on the clock. So if I'm Joe Schoen, maybe I pick up the phone and I call Cincinnati and I say, hey, you guys need a tight end? You want your pick of the litter? You don't want Dallas to beat you to the punch? Consider a trade. Let's talk trade. Let's see if we can work something out. What better way, folks, for the Giants to pick up additional draft capital and to stick it to a divisional rival? If you can think of a better way, I sure would like to hear it. But I think it makes too much sense if you're the Giants to maybe explore that type of trade down scenario. If you're able to pull that off, obviously, you retain a player in the first round. You get that 5th-year option at your disposal, and all is right with the world. And like I said, you stick it to a divisional rival who's looking to get better and keep the gap between you and the Giants as wide as possible. So that would be the scenario I would look for if I'm the Giants. Trade down and see if Cincinnati might want to come up to get a tight end. If say, for example, a Dalton Kincaid, a Michael Meyer. If he's on the board, I think Michael Meyer is probably the top ranked tight end in this draft class. Luke Musgrave is another one. Darnell Washington. I don't know if those all have first round grades. I know Meyer does. So if you're the Bengals and you can entice them, if you're the Giants and you can entice the Bengals with the thought of getting the top tight end in the draft, if he's there, you might have an easy time of it. And it could make for a very interesting evening. All right. Coming up, a case to trade totally out of the first round. What? Am I crazy? I don't think so. I'll explain why coming up after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're like me and you want to make a healthier snack choice, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then you've got to try a Built Bar or Puff. They're tasty treats that are healthy and amazing, with each bar or puff covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like eating a candy bar, but without all the fat, the carbs, and the sugar. Built Bars and Built Puffs give you a generous dose of protein in every serving. And we're talking on average about 17 grams, with most bars and puffs boasting about 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar. And did you know that you don't have to wait anymore for your box to be delivered from built.com? Just pop into your local Sam's Club or Walmart to pick up a box of assorted flavors. You can thank me later. Hey, Giant fans, make sure to join Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, and other Locked On NFL experts on the Locked On NFL Scouting YouTube page for live NFL draft coverage presented by Ultimate Football GM. Kyle and Joe will be going live for all of rounds 1, 2, and 3. And then on Saturday, they'll get you caught up after each round. Join the draft dudes for the first round tonight live on YouTube on the Locked On NFL Scouting page starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're talking about to trade or not to trade. That is the question. If you're the Giants, do you stay put in the first round, or do you trade out of the first round, or do you trade up, or do you trade down? What do you do? So many decisions. Goodness, picking out an outfit is probably easier than deciding whether to trade up or trade down or trade out. But we're giving you the pros and cons. So let's continue with that. Real quick, though, a bunch of you sent in some draft-related questions for the mailbag segment of the podcast. Sadly, folks, didn't get a chance to squeeze them in this week. So I apologize. We had guests galore, and then, of course, I had structured shows to do. So if you sent me a draft-related question, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer it pre-draft. That said, coming next week, at some point in the week, we will devote an entire show to a mailbag. We'll talk about your post-draft questions, anything you want to talk about. I'll announce that coming up next week because I owe it to you guys. So again, I apologize for not getting to the questions, but I will make it up to you. All right. Now, let's talk about the possibility of the Giants completely trading out of the first round. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, my God, you're crazy. The Giants wouldn't do something like that. What case could there possibly be for them to trade out of the first round? All right, I'm going to start with the fifth-year option argument, which a lot of you are probably saying, well, if they trade out of the first round, now they're not going to have a player on the fifth-year option, and that's a valuable tool to them. Well, here's my response to that, folks. It's a two-part response. Number one, as we are seeing now with that fifth-year option, it takes a big chunk out of your salary cap. All right. So if you're Joe Shane moving forward, and after 3 years, for example, that the guy you picked in the draft, or any guy you picked in the draft, is someone you want long-term for your roster, you start negotiating. All right. You start negotiating. You don't wait until the guy, if it's a first round pick, oh, now his fifth-year option is here and, we'll wait. No, be proactive. So you can save yourself some money in the long term if you do that. Now, I understand it takes two sides to make a contract. I get that. And there will be players that will say, no, I don't want to negotiate now. I want to wait. I think most players, though, if you go to them and you say, hey, let's talk about a new deal, and you structure the deal in such a way that it makes sense for them, you might be able to coax them into working with you on a contract that every year the cap number isn't so gross to where it's choking your cap, like the 5th-year option could do. All right. So that's one counter argument against, giving up the 5th-year option. Another reason, and I've mentioned this before, additional draft capital. The Giants, because they signed more free agents than they lost, are not projected to get any comp picks next year. If you're Joe Schoen and you like moving up and down the board, you want to pick up additional draft options for next year. I know they won't help the team this year, but you want to have that in your back pocket. So if you can get that by maybe enticing a team that maybe is in the top of the second round, that maybe wants to get back into the first round, you do it. And here's the other advantage, folks. If you can make a swap where you as the Giants are now picking somewhere in the first 5 or 6 picks of the second round, why wouldn't you? I mean, now you have a better chance of getting maybe the center you want, or if you want, a cornerback at that spot, or basically any position you want. There's something to be said about trading up and being at the top of the second round, because now it becomes a little bit easier for you to kind of figure out which direction you're going to go. You don't have to sit there and wait until you go on the clock again late in the second round. So that's another advantage. I mentioned the salary cap issue. Obviously, by not having a first round pick, you lower your salary cap liabilities to your draft class. And right now, the Giants, their salary cap situation, kind of shaky. They're going to need to make some room. They'll get it with Dexter Lawrence. They might get it with a couple of other guys. I think, once the roster cuts are made after training camp, there'll be some money cleared out. But will they have enough to get through the year? I'm not so sure. So that's another reason to consider trading out if you can find a suitable trade partner. Another reason is usually when you get within 25 picks, pick 25 downward in the range where the Giants are picking in the first round, the grades all start to cluster. So really, if you have guys with the same grade and you can move down and get a guy with a similar grade, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I mean, it makes too much sense. And you know what? That would not surprise me if the Giants look to trade out of the first round. If they could find somebody to do it, I could see Joe Schoen jumping all over that, if for no other reason than the salary cap space that they would gain and the additional draft picks. Now, obviously, I would have to kind of work out possible scenarios, and I'm going to see if I can do that on Giants Country. If I have time, I'll see if I can put some scenarios together and see if I can, what makes sense. But yeah, I could see that definitely being the case. All right. So those are the 3 options. And of course, there's the option to stay put, which I don't think Joe Schoen's going to do. Which of the 3 would I like to see? All right. I'm going to say it. Depends on how the board falls. But that being said, if the board falls a certain way, and if the Giants have a chance to trade out of the first round, if I'm Joe Schoen, I'm all over it for the reasons I just gave. I mean, I just find that very, very intriguing. I find that to be a gutsy move. It's a gamble, yes, but Joe Schoen has shown since he's been the general manager of this team that he's not afraid to take chances, that he's not going to be, conservative. He's not going to sit there and go, oh, I better stay put. Or he's not going to sit there and say, oh, I don't want to get too cute in this draft. Sometimes you got to take chances. And the Giants roster, I think, it's not complete. It's always going to be a work in progress, but it's a lot better than I think it was this time last year. And I expect the draft class that Schoen puts together from top to bottom, regardless of the round that he starts in, to be a lot better than, maybe what last year's class kind of brought to the table. We'll find out soon enough, folks, because depending on what time you're listening to it, it's just a matter of hours, minutes, or whatever until the Giants go on the clock. And we'll see. Do they trade up? Do they stay put? Do they trade back? Do they trade out? We'll have it all here for you on the Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure you keep it here all weekend long as we do extra shows for you. Until next time, folks, we'll see you soon.